on the Temple Mount, there's been a lot of discussion about preserving the status quo, which I gather means that Jews are not allowed to pray. They can go, but they can't pray. They can pray on the Western Wall of the old temple, but they can't pray on the top. They can visit, and that's been the situation since 1967. Why is that being challenged more than before? Why the sudden tension over that?
Okay, you've described the situation very well. Prime Minister Netanyahu has said, I have no intention of changing the status quo on the Temple Mount. He also says he supports the two-state solution, but in the case of the Temple Mount, I believe him. Okay? But I also believe that what he's saying is very inadequate, and I can explain that by 3 vignettes. What was the status quo on the Temple Mount during the British Mandate between 1922 and May of 1948? There was no status quo, because status quo applies only to sites that are contested. And during the entire mandatory period, there were no Jewish claims to access or do anything on the Temple Mount. We had deep attachments. There were contested sites. The Western Wall was contested. Rachel's tomb was contested. You Christians have a dog in this fight. The most visceral conflicts in the city of Jerusalem are in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and then you've got the Church of the Nativity. But it was not relevant. Okay? Fast forward. The situation that you described of the Temple Mount being accessible to non-Muslims, but exclusively a place of worship, didn't start in 1967. It started at the end of the Crimean War, where the Ottoman Empire opened up towards the west. So you had Jews like Moses Montefiore and Sir Baron Rothschild going to visit the Mount. They would go in a sedan so they wouldn't step foot on the Temple Mount. We're good at these things. Fast forward. In 1980, I'm in the IDF. I'm an officer in the Army, and I would, on a few occasions, accompany Israeli officers under my command to visit the Temple Mount. At that point, there was an entrance fee, and I would have to pay. Now, I would go there with a booklet of payment vouchers with the seal of the Israeli Ministry of Defense, step aside, and the Waqf, the guard of the Islamic Endowment, would fill it out. We would stamp it. He would get one copy. I'd get one. I'd send one to Tel Aviv. It was cordial, respectful. They knew me like a case of herpes. I was still an occupier, but it was respectful. Fast forward again. Israel has a minister of construction by the name of Uri Ariel, who's responsible for this settlement enterprise under Netanyahu, and he's a Temple Mounter. His cabinet says no prayer on the Temple Mount. The Shin Bet says no prayer on the Temple Mount. He goes there and he prays. Now, you can pray quietly and nobody will know. But you may have noticed in international flights that the ultra-Orthodox may not pray under 30,000 feet because it does not sufficiently annoy the other passengers. It's not enough that you pray. It has to be aggravated devotion. So Uri Ariel has to make sure that everybody knows he's praying. He does the priestly blessing. And then he goes on camera and says, I would be delighted in my capacity as Israel's Minister of Construction to see the third temple built. That is, he's not a kibbutzer like me. He's the Minister of Construction. To what do I compare this? Netanyahu is right. The hours of visiting the Temple Mount have not changed. No prayer has not changed. The authorities of the Waqf has not changed. But, this institution of open houses where people are allowed into private homes or offices that are architectural gems. 1980, when I went in, I went in, the people didn't exactly like it, but it was respectful, cordial, we went away. Today, they're going in and saying, hey, in a loud voice, it's not clear whether we're going to get rid of half of you or all of you. We're going to be doing major renovations, and you take out the tape measure and measure for the new drapes. 20 years ago, the Temple Mount was not a contested site. Today, it is a contested site, the quintessential contested site, even though the formal status quo has not changed. And I fault Netanyahu not so much for his policies, but for failing to rein in the pyromaniacs in his own midst. And that's the real danger of Jerusalem. I have a curious tastes. And there's one day in Jerusalem that I've decided that I'd like. This is my favorite day. It's Chol HaMoed Sukkot. It's during the middle days of Sukkot. You have the evangelical, dispensationalist, end-of-days Christians in town celebrating, calling for the construction of the third temple. You have the Temple Mounters trying to access the Temple Mount to see if they can get away with praying. And then you've got the Shabiba starting to pick up their rocks and the Molotov cocktails. It's God is in heaven and you have an egalitarian Jerusalem. One day, Jewish pyromaniacs, Christian pyromaniacs, and Muslim pyromaniacs. It's a delight.
Sounds inviting.